Welcome to Chinook Assembly TV. We are so excited that you have decided to join with us today. You can text Chinook MT to 1-888-364-4483 to download our church app. You can also check us out online at ChinookAssembly.com. And also, we would like for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Chinook Assembly TV. At this time, if you would like to contribute to our ministry here at Chinook Assembly, there are 4 ways for you to be able to do that. The first one, you can text Chinook to 206-859-9405. The second one, you can give on our website, ChinookAssembly.com/give. Number 3, you can give through our church app. And number 4, you can give by mailing in a gift to Chinook Assembly, P.O. Box 789, Chinook, Montana 59523. Thank you so much for contributing to our ministry here at Chinook Assembly.
Religion is focused on what I've done, what I do, and what I'm going to do in the future. When that's the case, every action I make is judged on the basis of what it does for me. Even my words and works of mercy and compassion will be attempts to balance my ledger sheet. The motivation stems from my desire to be a better person or my hope to remain in God's favor. But Jesus shows us a different approach. When we're not the focus, in order to love and serve others selflessly, we need to remember to look beyond our own lives. Religion says, look inside yourself, and you will find the strength to live a life of service to others. But Jesus says, look to me and I will show you the path to serving others, and I will give you the strength to live selflessly. The Gospel of John calls us to follow Jesus. Following him is not easy, and it's not a path to human greatness or man's acclaim. Following Jesus means we will have to put down the respect and riches of this world and pick up a wet, dirt-stained towel and use it to clean someone's muddy feet. The way that Jesus shows us how to follow him is through service. And so we see that in John chapter 13. You can go ahead and turn there with me. This is an amazing turn of events, because in chapter 13 of John, the writer of the Gospel of John, he switches modes. So up to this point, he's been telling us stories of what Jesus has done. And really, the chronology of John is so vast, and it doesn't follow just a seamless line. It's not A, B, C, D, E. It's not like that as much. There's a lot of stories, and it does follow a path, but it's a little bit more scattered thoughts. But it's interesting because in John chapter 13, John turns a corner, and he begins to share from chapter 13 to the end of 16, beginning of 17, really, he's sharing one night with you. Even through chapter 18, when Jesus is arrested and is sent off to be tried, we see that there's the span of just a day and a half of Jesus' life. And so John becomes very chronological in this moment. And so we see that John chapter 13 begins with them gathered together to celebrate the Passover feast. And so Jesus does something interesting. And so I want to read it to you as we look at how he gives us an example of this humble service. In John chapter 13, verse 1, it says this. It says, before the Passover festival, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And when it was time for supper, the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, Simon Iscariot's son, to betray him. Jesus knew that the Father had given everything into his hands, that he had come from God, and that he was going back to God. So he got up from the supper, laid aside his outer clothing, took a towel, and tied it around himself. Next he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to dry them with the towel tied around him. So we see right away that Jesus, for him to stop in the middle of the journey to the cross and to wash the feet of his disciples is a noteworthy thing that he's done. He pauses from all the journey and everything, this this huge moment where he's heading to Calvary, and he pauses in the middle of that to wash the feet of those who follow him. That was not common in the day. A master, a teacher would never have done that, because there was a hierarchy, and the uppers never served the lowers. And Jesus, he put a kibosh on that in the life of Christians and in the life of disciples. He says, hey, if you're going to follow me, you need to know that this is how I operate. It's different. Jesus' love for his disciples becomes one of the driving themes of the rest of the Gospel of John. We see it often, where it's mentioned that Jesus, out of love for his disciples, did such and such, or he responded and told them this. Jesus had the love of those around him. He was focused on them. This whole journey was for his disciples and those who would follow him. And so it's interesting to see that Jesus wasn't so focused on the cross that he lost what the cross really is for. And so we learn two things from this service of Jesus. We see that number one, no one is above serving. There's not one person that we come in contact with that is above being served, or that is above serving, that is above being able to lay down their authority or their fame or whatever, to be able to be humble, to lay down their pride so they can be humble to the ones around them. No one is above it. I heard a story once of a pastor who would consistently told the janitors that he would clean the toilets. And this pastor was in Africa, and so when he was asked by his congregation, when a few of his congregation members had noticed that the pastor was cleaning the bathrooms, they said, "Oh no, pastor, you shouldn't do that." And the pastor said to them, "If I don't do this, I might forget that I am not above serving." And so it was a humble reminder to him of his role to serve, and that he wasn't above doing the dirtiest jobs. And sometimes we get the mentality that as someone who maybe has been a Christian a long time or whatever, that we're no longer asked to do the hard things. We're no longer asked to serve in ways that would seem humiliating or embarrassing. And Jesus said, no, I'm going to do that very thing. What follower of Jesus has the right to refuse serving? When you see Jesus serve. If our master will humbly serve others, we are not exempt. And number two, no one is above being served. So like I said before, as I was jumping the gun, that no one, it doesn't matter who they are, is above being served. And look at Peter, for example, who responded to Jesus like, don't do this. And Peter was told by Jesus that no, you're not above being served, because it can be a backwards pride when we don't allow service to happen even to us. There's been times in my life where it's like, I didn't know if I didn't really want that person to do this act of service. It's like, well, I could do that or whatever, but I didn't recognize that by doing that I was stealing a blessing from someone else, because we're all called to serve, and so they were just acting on what the Lord had laid on their heart to do. And although I could have probably done it myself, Peter could have washed his own feet. In that moment, we can let our pride keep us from being served. And so it's important to remember that we're also called to be served. It goes both ways. That no one's above being served and no one is above serving. Jesus carefully washes the feet of a traitor. Notice that he washed Judas's feet as well, just as he washed the feet of Peter, James, and John. Though no one is below being served, in verse 14, Jesus narrows the focus of our humbleness to the family of God. Our brothers and sisters are to be the primary recipients of our selfless acts of kindness. It's one of the reasons why the church in Acts chapter 2 was said to have had no needs among them, because they worked together, they served one another, and it should be a witness to the world of our love for one another. We don't turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to the needy outside the church, but our first order of business is to meet the needs of one another in the church. That's what the family does. You're going to want to help and serve other people, but when it comes to your family, many times it's just a no-brainer. We end up doing it. We do it because that's what family does. We have a unique bond with one another, namely that we are the servants of the same master. We all serve the same person when we do these things. So let's look at Jesus and how he gives us the ability to serve humbly, because really, if you've thought about it, you probably know you can't really truly do this service in your own strength. And so let's look at what it says in John chapter 13. He says, he came to Simon Peter, who asked him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" And Jesus answered him, "What I'm doing you don't realize now, but afterward you will understand." "You will never wash my feet," Peter said. Jesus replied, "If I don't wash you, you have no part of me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not only my feet, but also my hands and my head." "One who has bathed," Jesus told him, "doesn't need to wash anything except his feet. But he is completely clean. You are clean, but not all of you." For he knew who would betray him. This is why he said, "Not all of you are clean." When Jesus had washed their feet and put on his outer clothing, he reclined again and said to them, "Do you know what I've done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are speaking rightly, since that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to also wash one another's feet. For I've given you an example, that you should do just as I have done for you. Truly I tell you, a servant is not greater than his master, and a messenger not greater than the one who sent him. If you do these things, you are blessed if you do them." So Jesus is providing for us, really, number one, a pattern for service and the power to serve. So Jesus is providing the pattern for service and the power to serve. So Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, which is pictured here by the foot washing, is what makes discipleship possible. The point right here is not the death of Peter's sin. Jesus wasn't just talking about that. The point is the necessity of Jesus' sacrifice, because Jesus is doing this in light of the cross. He has the cross in view, and so therefore he serves. And so he recognizes that the power of the cross is seen in the service. That when we humbly serve one another, it's exactly what the Lord did when he laid down his life for his friends. Like he says, no greater love than any man has than to lay down his life for his friends. He's speaking of the cross. It's a small foreshadowing or remembrance of what Christ has done. I love this quote where it says, just as indicates not only similarity and adherence to a standard, but also the ground on which his discipleship rests, and the source from which gains its strength. It directs them to Jesus' self-sacrificial love for them as a source and driving force for their love for each other. And number two, Jesus commands an attitude, not just an action. Foot washing is not the point. I've seen many people who say, "Oh, well, Jesus commanded us to foot wash." Well, that's not exactly what's going on here. Although foot washing is a beautiful semblance of what's going on, and it's a very humble act. It takes a lot of humility to be able to do that, and I have done that before with people. I have physically washed feet before. But the truth is that Jesus isn't commanding that we wash everyone's feet. He's commanding that we have an attitude of service, that we're willing to do this in so many different ways, that we're willing to actually step out and do something that might look embarrassing or humiliating. Wow, that's a hard word this morning. To us, but really blesses someone else. It can be performed just picture this. Picture if Jesus would have done this foot washing with a cold, dead, and uncaring heart. Like, come on, get over here. I need to wash your feet. Can you imagine? But I've seen people do that. I've seen people serve that way. And I would even say that maybe it's not even really serving when you do that. It's an obligation that you're living out, not necessarily a heart attitude. And that's why the focus is on desire, not duty. It's important for us to know that. We need some heart surgery for this to work. We need Jesus to do an open heart surgery on us, because naturally our heart doesn't desire to serve others unless there's something in it for us. You say, well, I know lots of people who love to serve and who are great at it and are so loving and kind about it. Well, the truth is that without Christ at work in the human heart, all service that we do falls short. And that, because one of the reasons is because that service many times is motivated by a self pleasing nature. Somehow this service is going to come back around, even if they merely do the service because they truly believe that if they do it, good things will come to them if they do good. And there's many religions and different denominations that teach that you're supposed to do good works because that really is the entrance fee. And so we really got to be careful with that. It has nothing to do with what we do. It has everything to do with how we do it and why we do it. And so it's important to remember that. The joy and happiness and blessing come not from a life of selfish acclamation, but from a life of self-denying compassion and service. But humble service is not natural, and that's why we have to have that heart surgery. Of all the marks of discipleship Jesus could have highlighted, he highlighted the willingness to pick up a towel and get our hands dirty. It's interesting to me that that's what he spent all of his time on in this one moment right here. In chapter 13, he opens up the meal by doing something he hadn't done. At least we haven't heard in the Gospels at all that he has done this before. And so we get this picture of Jesus serving. And that's one of the things, imagine you have one night to share all the things that you feel about people and to say all the things you need to say, do all the things you need to do, knowing you're going to die the next day. And you choose to wash people's feet. That's interesting to me. But Jesus did that. He chose to do that. Few things we do make the gospel more beautiful and compelling than when someone sees Christians with dirty towels and clean feet. Dirty towels and clean feet make the gospel clear. Every day, people doing everyday things to serve others. And so it's important for us to remember that, especially now that we're opening up this new year, 2021. It's important for us to look at the year and say, how are we going to live as people with dirty towels and clean feet? How are we going to do that? That's what humble service looks like, is to live our lives with dirty towels and clean feet. That's what following Jesus looks like, is to live that way. And so let me challenge you today. How do you need to step out and use what God has given you to wash some feet? How are you going to do that in this next year? What does it look like for you? How are you going to get involved? How are you going to serve others? Not because here's the deal: we don't serve because people they need people to step up and do things. We don't just serve because there's a position that needs to be filled. Many times in churches we think it like that way, like, oh, we need volunteers for this. There's some holes, there's some gaps, and so people need to serve here. I see churches that have done that have consisted all that they do around certain programs, while neglecting what everyone is actually able to do and gifted to do and willing to do. And so I would challenge you too that the church does need, when I say the church, I mean the church, the people of God. We need each other. And we need each other. If anything, COVID has taught us that. Over this last year, 2020 has taught us that we need each other. It is not good for us to not be connected to one another. And one of the best ways that we do that is by serving together, by serving each other, and being served by others. It's a part of the process. It's a part of the discipleship process. It's a part of the nature of the church, is that we're called to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And so he said that's one of the reasons why I think he said, now you need to go and do this. Like, you need to go and serve, because you need to do this for one another, because I'm going to the Father. And so he says, hey, the church is going to be my hands and feet. So, and what is Jesus doing? Washing feet. That's what he does. He reminds us that while washing feet, he presents the gospel in the simplest form, saying, hey, I laid my life down for you. And it's an act of love to do that. And so that serving is motivated by love. When we pick up the towel, we wash the dirty feet so that they can be clean. It really shows a huge picture of the gospel. That's what Jesus came. That's what he did for me. He washed my feet. He's made me clean. And he's done it for you, I pray. And he wants to do that for all of us. And so it's important for us to remember that it gives us a picture. I love what Hal Donaldson always says at Convoy of Hope. He says, before we can feed the spiritual need, we have to feed the physical need. And that's one of the reasons why they do their feeding programs, is because they believe so strongly that feeding the hungry gives them an opportunity to feed them spiritually, feed the hungry spiritually with Jesus. And so, can I just challenge you with that? Allow the Lord to challenge you with how you need to serve this next year and really live it out. Father, I thank you that you have given us an example and that you've also empowered us to live the way you want us to live and to serve the way you want us to serve. Lord, you've also, Lord, you've called us to live as an attitude of service before you and before others, Lord, to give a picture of the gospel. Help us to do that so people might see you and respond. Jesus, we love you. We thank you for who you are. In Jesus' name.